Futurama, the game. 3,000 years ago, in 1995, God spoke to his fallen son, Matt Groening, to bless humanity with another one of his gifts. You see, Groening was writing the super successful show that really kicked off his career, The Simpsons, and decided to pursue a very strong desire to create an entirely new idea, Futurama. As it was often the case with Groening, he assembled a super group of creative thinkers first, with the most obvious choice being The Simpsons co-producer David X. Cohen. As an already accomplished writer and producer of his own, Cohen and Groening spend much of their time researching books, television shows, and films, in hopes of conceiving their perfect sci-fi world they had in mind. By the time the two producers had a series to pitch to their Fox overlords, it was April of 1998, where many of the original characters and storyboards had already been worked out. The caliber of individuals assembled into one room was kind of staggering, to be fair. With the round table assembled, the writing staff alone held 3 PhDs, 7 master's degrees, and between them all had over 50 years of schooling in Harvard University. As one of the show's staff once stated, "We were easily the most overeducated cartoon writers in history, and it's worn on the project's sleeve." One of the last steps for Cohen and Matt was the acquisition of some of TV's most iconic voice actors to date, with Billy West, Joe DiMaggio, Tress MacNeille, Lauren Tom, Maurice LaMarche, Phil LaMarr, and David Herman being the whole goddamn line's share of voices. And just for safe measure, acquired an incredibly impressive guest list over the show's life, ranging from former Democratic nominee Al Gore and big screen actresses like Lucy Liu to songwriter Beth and Hall of Famer Hank Aaron. Hell, all jokes aside, Matt and Cohen's former success and creative vision for Futurama attracted some of the best talent our entertainment industry has ever had to offer to their silly and surprisingly witty sci-fi show. Futurama was an instant cult classic, with its uniquely crafted humor that set itself apart with other animated shows at the time, with references as cold as Schrodinger's cat's thoughts experiment, to a dream sequence in binary code.
Bender, what is it?
The show often depicted subtle sci-fi references throughout the entirety of the series, with Star Trek being one of their favorites.
He's dead, Jim.
However, Fox almost immediately feared the show would not be appropriate for the network or its audience, and expressed many concerns over the show's themes, like self-deleting booths, Bender's anti-social mentality, or the depiction of Dr. Zoidberg. Ultimately, this was one of the nails in the proverbial coffin. The corpo rats at Fox had had enough of this insubordinate show, and stopped giving their support. With that, Futurama was officially canceled for the first time. The hopes of nerds everywhere was restored for more Futurama content, and it was revealed that Unique Development Studios had acquired rights to make a video game for the PlayStation 2, the pinnacle of licensed gaming technology. During this time in gaming history, every movie and show had tie-in games being vomited out at high velocities, described as the Lost 73rd episode by Cohen himself. Futurama, The Lost Adventure, was a canonical addition to the series. However, it was only mentioned on the direct-to-DVD movie, The Beast with a Billion Backs, as a 30-minute special feature. Despite having most of what they needed to make a video game, the incompetent lawyers at Fox were unable to acquire the high-quality video footage from the special, and so were left with these little numbers blessed by the Xbox itself. Despite having many of the Futurama crew working on the game, Phil LaMarr and Lauren Tom were left out due to their higher salaries, a common theme for Fox. The game was envisioned to be a shooter platformer with puzzles, but it was generally hand-waved as yet another schlock license title when its corpse was wheeled out to the public shortly after the last episode of Season 4. The game was a short 4 to 5 hour romp in an otherwise unrealized tie-in world. Besides, people had far better games to play at the time. Without further delay, why don't we play the damn thing and you're crazy if you think I'm spending money on this. Digital preservation and having the ability to play these old games is really important to me, but these prices are getting out of hand. But for the sake of this video, I think it's time we visit my old friend, Vim. Welcome to Futurama the game, where the very first thing the professor does is sell the entire Planet Express crew down the river. In a classic good news, everyone, Farnsworth reveals that he sold the company to none other than Mom, the megalomaniac corporate overlord. Naturally, her first order of business is enslaving humanity and enforcing a curfew with a fleet of death troopers. No big deal. The crew's response? It's time to bail. But of course, the Planet Express ship is in shambles for reasons that remain unclear. And now the galaxy's fate rests on Fry, Leela, and Bender somehow fixing it. What could possibly go wrong? Your first mission sounds deceptively heroic, until you realize it's all about retrieving a hammer. The key to saving the universe, apparently. Taking control of Fry, you quickly discover that moving him around feels like guiding a drunk toddler on rollerblades. The first task? Fry being Fry, yanks the hammer from a junk pile and promptly gets crushed to death. Enter the Reanimator, which conveniently explains how the game's responding mechanics work, because you'll be seeing it a lot. Back on his feet, Fry's mission continues. Collect Professor Farnsworth tools scattered around the Planet Express office. Fans of the show will appreciate the detail here. The developers did their homework. You'll explore iconic locations, from Hermes' office, complete with the brain slug controlling him, to Scruffy's flooded boiler room, because nothing says workplace safety like ankle-deep water and electrical shortages. Once you've gathered all the tools, Fry returns the Professor, hammer in hand. Surprise! The dark matter engine is beyond repair. Fry's next mission: head to the pawn shop in Old New York to retrieve a backup engine. But first, he'll have to brave the sewers, because no space adventure is complete without a detour through mutant-infested garbage. Good thing the Professor gave us a blicky. From the cozy confines of the Planet Express office, Fry's next task is to wade through literal human waste to find a backup engine. Welcome to the grimy underbelly of New York, where enemies lurk around every slimy corner, and the only thing filthier than the environment is Fry's combat skills. Your first real enemies in the games are mutant lizards, hunched, slime-covered creatures that aggressively waddle towards Fry, as if personally offended by his mere existence, accompanied by these wormy loogie-hawking bastards, who may not look dangerous, but their constant spitting will test your patience. Dodging their attacks while trying to jump across sewage-filled gaps is harder than it looks. But don't worry, if you die, and you will, the trusty Reanimator will bring Fry back to life, so you can repeat the cycle of frustration over again. Fortunately for Fry, his blaster, though unreliable, is at least good for blasting mutants back into whatever toxic pit they crawled out of. Just remember, aim, shoot, and hope you don't fall into the river of sludge while doing it. After surviving the lovely sewers, Fry finally reaches the subway system, where the scenery becomes just as bland as you'd expect from an underground transit system. However, the enemies ramp things up a little bit with a bunch of Decaponian goons, who bear an unsettling resemblance to Zoidberg's distant relatives. Dressed in leather BDSM outfits for reasons that are never fully explained, they shuffle toward you, making weird, uncomfortable sounds. Thankfully, this is where Fry gets an upgrade: a shotgun. One well-placed shot can vaporize these creeps in a single blast. The rest of the level becomes significantly easier, as you gleefully mow down enemies like a deranged delivery boy turned action hero. For a brief moment, you feel invincible, until you remember you're still in a subway surrounded by sewage and questionable creatures. Now that Fry is an experienced killer, with at least 3 respawns under his belt, it's time to explore the ruins of Old New York. This level serves up plenty of post-apocalyptic charm, if by charm you mean dilapidated buildings, abandoned businesses, and robot-ridden streets. As Fry ventures through the decaying city, you'll be dodging more leather boys that pop up from the ruins, armed to the teeth with RPGs and eager to ruin Fry's day. The level is designed with enough traps and enemies to keep you on your toes, though Fry's shotgun helps even the odds. There's a certain satisfaction in blasting away those bastards, especially after the torment the mutants put you through in earlier levels. But of course, it wouldn't be a 2000s game without collectibles, and how can I forget? The nibbler cages are scattered throughout the levels in this game, tempting completionists to risk their lives for the chance to free everyone's favorite 3-eyed alien. The platforming puzzles in Old New York offer a little challenge, but nothing Fry can't handle, except, of course, the occasional death by explosion when you least expect it. After a long and painful journey through old ruins and derelict factories, there's really only one place left to go: the Red Light District. How could I forget about the city's most colorful neighborhood?
Does this casing make me look fat? Stop asking me that.
Just when you thought Fry's journey couldn't get any weirder, the game takes you to the Red Light District of New York. Fry's mission is still clear: try to reach the pawn shop without dying horribly. But first, he has to dodge death squads and over-enthusiastic clientele along the way. In this part of the game, management of lives become key, as the game throws enemies at you in waves, with hoverbots, mafia bots, and a few other robot rejects auditioning for the role of comic relief.
What did I tell you? No more hanging wires!
Of course, just when you think you're getting the hang of things, the game introduces the Tommy gun. Being a literal machine gun, the Tommy turns Fry into a one-man army, spraying bullets and mowing down enemies with ease. It's loud, it's chaotic, and it feels completely unnecessary. But hey, it's Futurama, and nothing needs to make sense here. As the chaos ramps up, this level throws in one last surprise: a Mom brand mech unit. Holy shit. Fry gets to pilot this clunky monstrosity, stomping through the old city streets with all the finesse of a malfunctioning vending machine. The mech suit's controls are about as responsive as a dead cat, but there's something oddly satisfying about smashing through enemies with reckless abandon. After bulldozing his way through the red light district and uptown, Fry reaches the climax of the level, only to learn that Mom isn't just enslaving Earth, she's turning the entire planet into a goddamn warship. And where's her next stop on this galactic takeover but, of course, a scrapyard asteroid? Because naturally, that's where all evil plans lead. When you think of a galaxy-conquering plan, the first place that comes to mind is a desolate backwater world with deadbeat creatures inhabiting it. Our next mission takes Bender to the shipyard. If you thought the neon nightmare of the red light district was bad, just wait until your knees start breaking, fighting off waves of angry rock monsters and lizard-like enemies. It's time for Bender to finally step up, and in true fashion, his approach to saving the universe is as straightforward as you might expect. Armed with his bare fists, Bender's gameplay is less about strategy and more about brute force. Combat takes center stage in this level, with rocky and scaly bastards charging Bender down from any corner. The enemies might not be the brightest bunch, but they sure make up for it in sheer numbers. Near the end, the shipyard throws in a mini-boss for good measure, if you could even call it that. One of Mom's sons is hunkered down behind a turret, sending rounds downstream like a bat out of hell. The fact we have to do this is frustrating alone. Naturally, the solution is as simple as getting closer until you can set off a set of explosives underneath them. Pushing onward, Bender is now pissed and ready to reach the next section of this orange nightmare. The next level takes us out of the scrapyard and straight into the frying pan. Bender finds himself running, well, lumbering, from a massive rolling death ball because, of course, the game couldn't resist throwing in an Indiana Jones reference. After a few close calls and only a few respawns, we narrowly escape that pixel-perfect bullshit, getting dropped straight into Mom's underground mining facility. A place that's more about dodging industrial death traps than smashing things to bits. You take on conveyor belts, moving platforms, and heavy machinery that fill this labyrinth, daring Bender to prove he's got the platforming skills of anything other than a robot. Instead of breaking stuff, the real focus here is on Bender's awkward navigation, hopping between sections that always seem to move at the worst possible moment. Conveyor belts whisk him into danger, while environmental hazards pop up just when you think you're safe. It's like the level itself is rooting for you to fail. Of course, Bender never forgets his true calling: petty theft. Gems are scattered everywhere across the level, and Bender's grabbing it up like a kid in a candy store. Whether it makes sense for there to be treasure in a collapsing mine shaft on a desert asteroid isn't really important. What matters is it's shiny, and he wants it. After a final dramatic leap into a hopper, Bender is shot out of the mines and into Red Rock Creek, ready to face whatever fresh hell awaits. After surviving that bullshit, we now have to navigate this barren landscape while fending off more rockmen and hostile purple bastards. There's hardly anything special that sets this area apart from the scrapyard, besides an abandoned ship that crashed in the middle of the desert. Inside, it wouldn't be a very good licensed video game without a few pop culture absurdities. In this alien ship, it's packed with Xeno-like skulls, with the interior looking like it was ripped straight out of Alien. And after battling through it, Bender faces Leonard, a tank-driving mini-boss with a bad attitude. This fight involves dodging tank shots and using nearby turrets to chip away at Leonard's force field. Using the simple 3 strikes you're out method, games love to use it this time. Once Leonard is finally down, Bender moves on to turn off the tractor beam for good. With Red Rock Creek behind him, Bender reunites with the Planet Express crew. And while wasting time talking instead of fleeing, Mom and her sons board the ship and take Professor Farnsworth's head by force, and slingshot the rest of the crew straight into the sun. In a twist that only Futurama can pull off, it turns out that the sun has a habitable surface.
I'm burning to death!
Yes, that cancer-inducing hellscape in the sky is home to the Sun People, who live in constant fear of the mighty sun god, a deity who apparently has a penchant for raising an army of skeletal minions from their bones. Obviously, in a universe this absurd, traditional leadership methods are just too mundane when you can summon the undead and travel across the universe. It's Leela's turn to take over on this level, and her kickassery hasn't been dialed down from the show. While Fry's weapons have less than elegant solutions, Leela's hand-to-hand combat is the equivalent spam fest. Her mission: free the Sun People from the tyranny of the sun god, and in return they will refuel the Planet Express ship. The combat here is really simple, as Leela karate chops her way through waves of grenade-happy skeletons who rush at her like the boneheads they are. The platforming is mercifully minimal in this level, which is great because I don't ever recall signing up for molten hopscotch. Instead, we focus on beating up hordes of undead rebels who are simply trying to defend their fiery homeland from a relentless one-eyed space captain and the influence of their deity. Between brawling and brutalizing skeletons, Leela also collects loot, disregarding that this place might need funds for a reconstruction effort after I'm done with it. Why is there even gold here? What good would it do him anyways? Because
Shut up and take my money.
the puzzles on this level are kinda dumb. You can think of them as a slightly more annoying Simon Says game that requires you to match the symbols on the wall. Once you're done finally questioning your life choices, you'll find yourself hopping across rivers of lava, delving into local temples, and invading public spaces to use the conveniently placed glowing crystals here, sending beams of light into the center of the city. Clearly, I'm gonna have to activate each individual pyramid, one by one, until I can unlock the main temple and rid this place of the sun god's influence. Drop-kicking funny bone after funny bone, Leela finally makes it to the center pyramid and into the level's climax. A janky-as-hell boss fight against the sun god himself, who naturally throws fireballs and generally makes things as inconvenient as possible. The trick here is to lure his attacks into these crystals and hit the central button while he's in the middle of his AoE fireball tantrums. And after doing this 3 times, the sun god bites the dust, ultimately monologuing himself to death. Narrowly escaping the collapsing pyramid, Leela surfaces to claim victory, freeing the Sun Peoples for good, along with the dark matter they'll need to get the hell out of here. After leaving behind the complete mayhem of a power vacuum in space, the crew dip out in the Planet Express ship, but there's no time for celebration. We decide to head off to the professor's friend, Adoy. We better hurry though, because in the meantime, Mom is using Professor Farnsworth's head to unlock the Earth's death ray and start vaporizing planets in her wake. Arriving in one piece for a change on Bogot, the crew is greeted by Zoidberg and his trusty steed. That's right, everyone's favorite walking crustacean takes the reins in this level, and it's just as chaotic as you'd expect. Adoy, which is just Yoda spelled backwards, tells us that in order to help us save the universe, we'll need to use his time tunneler in order to stop Mom before she becomes unstoppable. Of course, the generator meant to power the damn thing is across the whole swamp. This level seems simple enough. Ride a wild animal through a swamp and reconnect the time tunneler. It's not that easy though. Hell, it's one of these levels. This is the type of level that makes you want to question your sanity. Steering Zoidberg in this sequence is a special kind of torture. We swerve across the swamp like a drunk crab trying to ride a unicycle, crashing into obstacles and getting knocked down into the murky water more times than I'd like to admit. Every jump feels like a gamble, and every slight angle like a fucking catastrophe waiting to happen, ready to drag Zoidberg into his watery doom. Not to mention, near the end of this death race, the graphics were completely broken for me, which, granted, were maybe caused by my emulator. But the spike traps on their way weren't exactly helping either. Despite all the odds and what feels like an eternity of retries in this horrid fucking level, Zoidberg finally reconnects the power to the time tunneler. With the time tunneler online, the crew attempts to travel back in time and prevent the sale of the Planet Express. But in true Futurama fashion, the only reward Zoidberg gets is being left behind, while the rest of the crew speeds off without him. You deserve this. However, because nothing ever goes according to plan, they overshot the mark and crash land right back in the Planet Express's garage, in a barely functional ship. Time paradox, anyone? They decide to take the functional ship and crash it straight into MomCorp Tower. The crew make it in time to delay Mom's galactic takeover, only to fall for one of those dumb trap doors, leading us to the last and final level of this game. The only thing standing in the way of Mom is the dysfunctional Planet Express crew. And so, Bender takes the first leg of the mission, smashing through waves of MomCorp security bots, and lazily avoiding laser grids that seem designed more to annoy than to actually stop you. His part is short, but the enemy's face get progressively bigger at least. Once Bender clears the path with bot-on-bot violence, Leela steps in to disable Mom's defense systems. This section focuses on fast-paced platforming, with Leela battling the environment more than anything. After a few frustrating puzzles and jumping over corridors of machine gun fire, we open the final door with a boring sequence of buttons being pressed. Diving through laser grids, Leela finally reaches Mom's inner sanctum, leaving it up to Fry to take down Mom's ultimate weapon, Destructor. Because when the fate of the galaxy hangs in balance, who better save the day than the most underqualified delivery boy in history? The final portion of this game stretches on a bit too long with Fry, engaging in the exact same formula of avoiding gunfire and activating doors one by one, with ultimately the purpose being the acquisition of our final weapon, the plasma rifle. Oh, yes. After dying a few times to this puzzle, I finally had all I needed to take down Destructor and anything else in my way. Obliterating Central Security and rescuing the last of the Nibblers, I made my way into the boss arena and grabbed all the extra ammo I could want. The Destructor boss fight is about as simple as it gets. He can still hit like a freight train though, so make sure to use these pillars to your advantage and wait for him to fire his missiles. At this point, you just hit him with your plasma rifle, taking advantage of his weak spots. 3 solid hits later, Destructor is down. The reanimator falls from the ceiling, breaking on impact with Destructor, causing his corpse to topple over onto the crew, killing their versions in the timeline for good. Professor Farnsworth, in a move that can only be described as anticlimactic brilliance, snaps Mom's hip and rips up the current contract, but not before contemplating taking her sombrero as a final chip on the proverbial table. The game ends just how it begins, as a palindrome in a self-correcting time paradox, with Farnsworth walking into the office while wearing the damn sombrero, proclaiming again that he has sold the entire company to Mom. Good job. You're stuck in a perpetual loop now, until time ends. After slogging through the game, you might expect that collecting every last nibbler and finishing 100% would unlock some kind of hidden treasure. But alas, the extra section is just about as exciting as Bender's cooking. What you get are cutscenes you've already seen before, and a few loading screens, because we definitely needed more of those. Besides that, there's the game's original soundtrack, and that's about it. At least you can say you've seen all of it, even if all feels like a participation ribbon. In the end, Futurama the game is about as smooth and polished as one of Zoidberg's molting cycles.
Ah, the fresh air feels good.
Stop doing that!
Clunky, awkward, and at times downright unpleasant. Sure, the controls handle like you're driving the Planet Express ship through molasses, and the platforming seems more like a cruel joke than a challenge, yet somehow the game still manages to be an entertaining mess. It's like a broken vending machine that still spits out free snacks. Frustrating, but oddly rewarding. For fans of the series, there's something comforting about seeing Fry, Bender, and Leela stumble their way through the game's chaotic levels, even if everything else feels half-baked. The humor and charm of the show are still there, buried beneath layers of clunky gameplay, but it's enough to keep you hanging on. That said, recommending this game to anyone who isn't a Futurama fan feels like an act of cruelty. Between the data mechanics, occasional glitches, and painfully underwhelming extras, it's clear this game didn't make it off the assembly line with any accolades in tow. At its core, Futurama the game is a love letter to fans. Though written hastily and delivered by a robot who clearly took a detour through a glitchy dimension, it's not a masterpiece. It's a time capsule of the early 2000s, when licensed games ruled the bargain bins. And somehow, that's still enough to make it charming in its own frustrating way. If you've stuck around this long, you either really love Futurama, or you're just here for the schadenfreude. Either way, I appreciated your company in this journey through a licensed tie-in hell. If you enjoyed watching me suffer, or maybe you just love seeing forgotten games dusted off, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really goes a long ways. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into nostalgic-induced regret. And hey, let me know in the comments, did you actually play this game back in the day? Or are you just now finding out about this bizarre attempt at bringing Futurama crew into the gaming world? Thanks again for watching, and until next time, remember, even the worst games have a place in our heart, right next to those forgotten VHS tapes of 90s cartoons. See you in the next one.